ଆଠନା ବସିବ ରାତିରେ ଚଉଦ ପନ୍ଦର ପ୍ରମିସ୍ ସାତ ଆଠନା ବସିବ।
Good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, welcome to the delegate paper presentation, non-competitive category, ISA WebCon Kerala 2020. To chair this session, to judge this session, we have with us the judges, Dr. Mubarak KK, Dr. Sujata Ghosh, Dr. Vinodan, and Dr. Shamshad Begum. Dr. Vinodan and Shamshad will join us soonly. We have 9 papers, and each presenter has allotted 6 minutes for the presentation and 1 minute for the Q&A. Judges, please note it's 6 minutes for the presentation and 1 minute for the Q&A. Presenter, please note at the 5th minute, you will get a voice alert saying 1 minute left. So we have with us our first presenter, Dr. Shakti.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Shakti, you can share your screen.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Go to the presentation mode. Dr. Shakti, your time starts now.
Yes. Good afternoon to all. Comparison of CPAP pre-oxygenation versus conventional pre-oxygenation on duration of safe apnea time in patient undergoing elective surgery under general anesthesia. Now come to the introduction part. Maintaining tissue oxygenation is of utmost importance in airway management during general anesthesia. Prolonging the safe apnea time reduces the risk of hypoxic injury in case of an inadvertent delay in intubation. The application of CPAP during pre-oxygenation prevents atelectasis despite the use of 100% oxygen, thereby increasing oxygenation and duration of safe apnea time. Aims and objective to compare the duration of safe apnea time in patient pre-oxygenated with CPAP and patient pre-oxygenated conventionally posted for elective surgery under general anesthesia. My study material method is after obtaining approval from the Institutional Review Board and Institutional Ethics Committee, we recruited a total of 60 adult patients of age between 18 to 40 years of either sex for our study. The patients were randomized into 2 groups of 30 patients each using closed envelope technique. Group Z, zero end expiratory pressure JEEP group, and group P, positive end expiratory pressure PEEP group. All monitoring will be done continuously. Patient in JEEP group will be pre-oxygenated conventionally with 100% oxygen for 5 minutes at the rate of 8 liters per minute. Patient in PEEP group will be CPAP of 5 cm of STO during pre-oxygenation using Drager Primus anesthesia workstation. These are inclusion and exclusion criteria. Inclusion criteria: ASA grade 1 of age group between 18 to 40 years of either sex, and excluded criteria: SpO2 less than 97% on room air, non-ambulant for more than 24 hours, Observation and result: the duration of safe apnea will be measured in seconds from the time of administration of succinylcholine hydrochloride to the time when SpO2 reaches 94%, or a duration of 8 minutes has elapsed, whichever is earlier. Both group members were equally comparable in age group and sex distribution. Mean value of pulse, systolic, diastolic blood pressure, and mean arterial pressure between two groups were statistically significant at various intervals between PEEP and JEEP group. These are showing the duration of apnea between the two groups. The mean and standard deviation of the safe duration of apnea was found to be significantly longer in PEEP group compared to the JEEP group. Difference was statistically very significant. Come to the discussion part. Anesthesia induction usually leads to apnea. During apnea, oxygenation depends on the oxygen reserve stored within the body, which are mainly localized in the lungs, red blood cell, plasma, and myoglobin. While breathing room air, these stores are quantitatively low. The normal store of oxygen in healthy young adult breathing air were approximately 1500 ml, and this may be increased to 3700 ml following pre-oxygen with 100% oxygen. In our study showed that application of continuous positive airway pressure of 5 cm STO during 5 minutes of pre-oxygenation with 100% oxygen significantly increase the duration of safe apnea time. This technique can be helpful in increasing the margin of safety in patients with anticipated difficult airway and in case where rapid sequence induction is desirable. Now concluded of our study that the study concludes that the application of continuous positive airway pressure during pre-oxygenation is a simple, well-tolerated technique that may have advantage in patients with anticipated difficult airway, morbidly obese patient with increased risk of desaturation, and during rapid sequence induction via assisted ventilation. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank
Over
you.
to the judges. Dr. Mubarak, sir.
Yeah, doctor. So you have concluded that application of CPAP is a better way of pre-oxygenation. Is it not? Is it not?
CPAP is better.
Yeah. Do you advise to do it routinely or in high risk phases only
Sir, routinely,
for all patients?
yes.
Okay. Okay. Over to other judges.
Sujata, ma'am.
It's all right.
Yeah.
Since there is one more, you can other judges can ask.
Thank you. Dr. Shamshad.
Yes, yes.
Ma'am, any queries? Any question?
Okay. So you found it as useful. The CPAP is better than pre-oxygenation, is it?
Sorry,
Okay.
ma'am.
You found it useful when we use for normal cases also.
Normal cases also and
yeah.
anticipated difficult airway cases also.
Only for indicated cases you were using CPAP, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, it's a good. Okay. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Shakti, and all the judges.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Next, we have others, Dr. Priyanka. Dr. Priyanka, can you share your screen?
Okay. Otherwise, it's a good. Okay. Okay.
Please close in your browser. I think you have opened it in a browser also, virtual conference. Close that one.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Next, we have others, Dr. Priyanka. Dr. Priyanka, please close your browser or virtual conference ka that tab, close it.
It's already
Please
closed.
close in your browser. I think we can hear the echo.
Yes, we can.
Close the browser.
Okay. I've closed.
Yes. Dr. Priyanka, your time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to present my study, The Clinical Learning Environment in Anesthesiology in Kerala. Is it good enough? A web-based survey. Measuring the clinical learning environment throws light on the quality of an educational program and also provides guidance on the amendments to be made. The learning environment in anesthesiology in our country has not been adequately explored. So we conducted an online survey with the primary objective of evaluating the quality of postgraduate training in Kerala as perceived by the anesthesiology residents in the state. And the secondary objectives were to assess the deficits and to identify the possible areas of improvement. The questionnaire was developed by 2 clinical investigators and the content validation was done by 3 senior anesthesiologists. Some revisions were suggested and the revised questionnaire was piloted in 10 anesthesiology residents, following which construct validity was assessed by principal component method, which revealed that Cronbach's alpha for all items was 0.87, which showed good internal consistency among the items. So the final questionnaire was composed of 3 parts. Part A dealt with the demographic details. Part B contained 22 statements to be answered on a 5-point Likert scale. And the statements were divided across 4 domains of social environment in the operating room, supervision and feedback, learning opportunities, training program, and resources. The Part C looked for possible areas of improvement and suggestions for improvement. So the questionnaire was formatted on Google Forms and the link to the form was sent on WhatsApp numbers with a covering message explaining the purpose of the survey, and strict anonymity was maintained. Responding to the survey was considered as consent to participate and 3 reminders were sent. And all postgraduates doing MD or DNB anesthesiology in Kerala at the time of survey works included. Demographic data was analyzed using descriptive statistics, and the Likert scale was given a score from 5 to 1. 2 questions were reverse coded during analysis, and scores were added up to calculate each domain score and displayed as mean with standard deviation. Since our scores followed normal distribution, we used unpaired t-tests to compare the scores between residents of government and private institutes and residents doing MD and DNB. Coming to the results, the response rate was 64.7%. There was no statistically significant difference in the demographics between the comparison groups. The domain of social environment scored the highest and the domain of supervision and feedback scored the least. This is a graph showing the Likert scale scores of social environment in the operating room. And from this, we can see that our residents in generally found the social environment in their hospitals to be very friendly. Coming to the domain of supervision and feedback, 60% of the residents had an opportunity to discuss their anesthetic plan with the teacher posted with them. 50% of them felt that the teachers were fair in their evaluation and helped to build their confidence. 60% received feedback and positive feedbacks and necessary corrections on their work. And only 34% felt stressed out by their workload. Coming to the domain of learning opportunities, though majority of them got adequate opportunities to develop their technical skills, only 34% were trained in their non-technical skills. 58% of them had a regular class schedule, but less than half of them had regular case discussions. And only 42% of them had regular assessments done as theory and practical exams. Coming to the domain of training program and resources, 62% of the respondents had access to learning resources like internet and journals in their institution, and 62 got adequate rotational postings. Simulation lab training was available to only 20% of the residents. A large majority were trained in BLS and ACLS, and only half of them felt encouraged to do research. So when the scores between government and private institutes were compared, the private institutes scored higher in statistically significant way in social environment and training program and resources. When MD and DNB students were compared, the DNB students gave higher scores in the area of social environment and feedback, social environment and supervision and feedback, while MD students gave higher scores to the in the area of learning opportunities. The most common modifications suggested included more tutorials and case discussion and more hands-on with procedures like central venous access. The most recurring themes from the suggestions made by the residents included reducing workload and stress, autonomy, and more classes. Coming to the discussion, the clinical learning environment was perceived to be of medium to high quality by the anesthesiology residents of Kerala, with major lacunae identified in some areas. The social atmosphere in OR was perceived positively by majority, which is an encouraging finding since the climate in the learning environment has a great impact on the potential quality of learning. Less than half of the residents agreed to having regular assessment in their institutions. NVE conducts regular formative assessments, but KUHAS has no such provision in its curriculum. All limitations inherent to a survey study are applicable to our study as well. Non-responders could not be identified, so non-responder bias was not assessed. Way forward, each institution needs to make reforms based on opinions of their students, and there should also be provision for students to evaluate their teachers. So to conclude with, educating the anesthesiologists of the future is challenging. Robust evaluation of the learning environment allows for objective assessment of quality of training. Quality of training was perceived positively, though some major lacunae were seen, which gives us directions for improvising training program in Kerala. And ISA can monitor and improve the training standards in our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka. Over to the judges. Dr. Sujata.
Hello.
Yes, madam.
That was a nice study, but according to you, Dr. Priyanka, what is the way forward? You have mentioned a few, but suppose you were the one assessing and grading the students around you. What do you think is the most pertinent way forward?
Definitely more amount of classes, more regular case discussions, and case discussions should be given equal importance as theory classes. One major.
And what about the assessments?
Second finding we found was that MD students, the DNB students gave higher scores than MD students in several arenas. If I had a long table with all the record, each scores given for each statement we used, and the MD students, DNB students gave higher scores, which means the MD students were less satisfied.
Right. Do you presume that the workload of the MD students was greater and it might act as a confounding factor?
That statement did not have much difference among MD and DNB students. The workload was equally perceived by both students.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Priyanka, how did you choose the MD and DNB institutions for your study?
All the institutions were included among the Kerala, from Kerala.
All the institutions in Kerala were included?
Yes.
Okay. Why did you include diplomas? You excluded?
Sir, diplomas courses are not, they have been removed, so I excluded the students.
It has not been removed. It is still going on. And,
it is still going on, but now only the few remaining students are available.
And the national board is bringing out the diploma again, so it's not going on. And another thing, our university is not KUHAS, it is KUHS, Kerala University of Health Sciences. You told it is KUHAS. It is not KUHAS.
Because of the lack of time, I simplified.
No, it's not KUHAS. It is KUHS, Kerala University of Health Sciences. And what is your advice regarding from your study? How do you what do you advise with your
first and foremost, institutional reforms should be based on evaluations conducted at an institutional basis. Each department should conduct analysis from their students, get feedback from their students, and make reforms based on that.
Okay.
Priyanka, I want to ask you one question.
Okay, madam.
Because how you selected between the DNB students as well as the MD students, you have given you took the feedback from all the students equally.
Yes, madam. We collected the data from the ISAMEDCON contact from our postgraduate list. We took the contact numbers, and we collected the numbers of all the postgraduates from Kerala.
Yes. Okay. So the numbers
this thing we included all the students from Kerala, and of those who responded, we analyzed.
Yes. Okay. So the main difference that I have found is that the number of MD students are high when we compare the DNB students, and also the institutions are also different. So as such, we cannot compare both directly when we take the infrastructure facilities of both.
Madam, definitely that is one limitation of our study.
Yes, that is the main limitations. That's it.
Because
That means such an
that is why I'm saying each institution needs to make reforms based on their analysis done from feedbacks from their own students.
Yes, okay,
That was one definite limitation of our study, but because of the time limitation, I removed it from my slide.
Okay, no, it was really an interesting,
Yes.
interesting study. Okay, it's
Priyanka,
very
how
good.
many
With
MD
the
and
interest
how many
of
DMD
time, can
students
we
were
move
there?
to the next session, judges, please? With the interest of time, can we move to the next session, please?
Okay, okay.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you, judges.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next, we have with us Dr. Sharon. Dr. Sharon, please share your screen. Go to the presentation mode. Dr. Sharon, your time starts now.
Good afternoon. I'm Sharon from SWIMS Tirupati, and my paper is on evaluation of quick sequential organ failure assessment in predicting mortality in intensive care unit. Scoring systems were developed to emphasize on the evaluation and monitoring of the health services. QSOFA score was designed initially to identify the presence of sepsis in a patient. But because of the different stage of illness, the initial SOFA score will not be enough to identify the outcome. So to mitigate these variations, we need to get the serial measurements. So in our study, we assess the ability of QSOFA score and delta QSOFA score, which is found by finding the difference between the two serial values of QSOFA score to predict the outcome in an ICU. The aim of the study is to assess the ability of QSOFA score to predict mortality in ICU of a tertiary care hospital. Our study is a single center prospective observation study. After getting approval from Institute Thesis Protocol Approval Committee and Institute Ethics Committee, we conducted the study, and after obtaining the consent from the patient or from the patient attenders, we started the study. Patient will undergo detailed clinical examination and laboratory investigations. And QSOFA score was noted within 24 hours of admission to ICU and 48 hours later. And management of the patient was carried out as per the policy of the department. And the patients were followed till discharge or death or transfer from ICU to other ward after stabilization. The outcomes studied include mortality and duration of ICU stay. The sample size was calculated using Cohen's d method, taking into account the moderate effect by d is equal to 0.5 and power 80% and alpha 0.05. For this gave us a sample size of 51. And our inclusion criteria is from 18 to 65 years of old, and all the patients of either sex on ventilator support or on room air admitted to respiratory ICU and medical ICU were included into the study. Patients apart from this age group were excluded, and patients who died within 24 hours of admission to ICU were excluded. Patients or attendants who were unwilling for the study were also excluded. And the following data like informed consent, demographic characteristics and indication for ICU were also noted. All categorical variables were summarized as number and person, and all continuous variables were summarized as mean and standard deviation. Comparison between mean values were done by Pardy t-test or Wilcoxon test, according as data follows normal distribution or not. Comparison between categorical variables was done by chi-square test or Fisher's exact test. Results were displayed by suitable graphs and tables, and the results having p-value of less than 0.05 was considered as significant. All calculations were performed using Excel, SPSS 20.0 and MedCalc. So totally 116 patients are included in the study during a period of 6 months, of which 2 patients are excluded because they died within 24 hours of admission to ICU. So total of 114 patients data were analyzed. And this table and graph shows the comparison of mean systolic blood pressure between the survivors and the non-survivors in day 1 as well as day 3. There was a significant difference with regard to day 1 systolic blood pressure between survivors and non-survivors. With regards to mean respiratory rate, the survivors had a lower respiratory rate compared to non-survivors with a significant p-value. And with regards to day 1 GCS score, the patients with better GCS on day 1 survived, and there was a significant difference between the survivors and the non-survivors. And with the day 3 GCS score also, the patient with better GCS on day 3 survived, and there was a significant difference between the survivors and the non-survivors. With regards to mean QSOFA score, the survivors had a lesser QSOFA score compared to non-survivors on day 1 as well as on the day 3, and there was statistically significant also. With regards to mean delta QSOFA score, The mean delta Q-SOFA score among the survivors is 0.4 and among the non-survivors it is 0.5. There is no significant difference among the survivors and the non-survivors with regards to mean delta Q-SOFA score. With coming to the receiver operative characteristic curves and the area under the curve, for day 1 Q-SOFA score it is 0.676 with a p-value of 0.007, and that for the day 3 Q-SOFA score it is 0.641 with the p-value of 0.032. The area under curve for delta Q-SOFA score is 0.546 with a p-value of 0.485, which is not statistically significant. In our study, there was a male preponderance, which is also observed in study conducted in Japan, and the female percentage was 37.7%, which is comparable with the same study. And the mean age of the study participants is 41.4 years, which is comparable with the study conducted by Aditi Jain et al. And coming to the variables of Q-SOFA, the day 1 Q-SOFA score is comparable with the study conducted in Japan. And the mean respiratory rate among the survivors is 20 plus 6.2 is 23 plus 7.9 among survivors and the non-survivors respectively, which is comparable with the study conducted in Japan. And the mean day 1 systolic blood pressure among survivors is 122, and in non-survivors it is 113. For day 3 systolic blood pressure, it is 120 among the survivors and 118 among non-survivors, which is comparable with the study conducted in Japan. The mean day 1 GC score and the day 3 GC score is also comparable with the study conducted in Japan by Eamon P. Wright et al. The non-survivors had a higher mean Q-SOFA score in day 1 and day 3, and it is comparable with the study in Pittsburgh. 83% of the survivors had Q-SOFA less than 2, comparable to 78% in a study conducted in Kenya. The area under the curve, as discussed earlier, is comparable with 4 different studies conducted in Japan, China, Chicago, and Denmark. There was no significant difference between survivors and non-survivors with regards to mean duration of ICU stay. The mean duration of ICU stay among survivors is 12 days, and that for non-survivors is 15 days, which is comparable with 2 different studies. Mortality rate in our study is 22.8, which is comparable with 3 different studies conducted in Kenya, Australia, and Denmark. The limitations is our ICU is a mixer type ICU, and the data.
Sharon, your time limit exceeded.
Conclusion, we conclude that day 1 Q-SOFA and day 3 Q-SOFA can predict mortality in ICU, but delta Q-SOFA score has got no significance in predicting mortality in ICU. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharon. Over to the judges. Dr. Shamshad.
Yes. Okay. Ms. Sharon, is it what is your opinion regarding this comparison of the Q-SOFA score for assessing the mortality rate? Usually we use it to assess the sepsis, isn't it?
Yes,
so how you find it?
Initially it was assigned to in sepsis patients only, madam, but there were studies which showed that it can be used to predict the mortality in intensive care units also. But the problem is the single value of Q-SOFA score is that
the patients other than having sepsis, is it?
Yes, madam. And even with the patient with having sepsis also, the patients will have varying conditions. They might improve or they might not improve. So the single value cannot predict the outcome. So it is better to get the serial values, madam. That's why we chose the serial value and we took the delta of that value, madam.
Okay. The other judges.
Dr. Mubarak.
Sharon, you have included ventilated as well as patients on room air, no?
Yes.
Has it affected your findings and outcomes?
No, sir. In my study, there were 64 patients were on ventilator, sir, and 50 patients were on room air, sir.
No. Take up both ventilated and non-ventilated patients. Has it affected your study, your findings? Or the similar studies are also like that?
Yes, sir. My parent article also they taken into account both the ventilator cases as well as the room air cases, sir.
So what's your final advice?
Instead of taking the single value, if we take the serial values of Q-SOFA, it will be helpful for us to predict the mortality in ICU.
Okay.
Over to Dr. Sujata, ma'am.
Sharon, what is Cohen's d method that you used? Could you please elaborate very briefly?
Madam, there are very few studies which has taken the serial values for Q-SOFA score, madam. So we did not have any article as a reference to get the sample size, madam. So to calculate the sample size, and we assumed that the QSOFA will have a moderate effect in predicting the mortality. So we took the Cohen's-d method formula, and we have applied for moderate effect D as 0.5, and between the difference between the 24-hour value and 48 hours value, and you're taking the standard deviation as the denominator.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sharon. And thank you, judges. Next, we have Dr. Please note, the next presenter, Dr. Divya, she is yet to join. Judges, please note, the next participant, Dr. Divya, yet to join. So we are moving with the Dr. Abhilasha.
Close Zoom to take pictures. Allow. ये आ गया कैमरा भी आ गया इसमें
Dr. Abhilasha,
yeah, good afternoon everyone.
please share your screen. Please make sure some disturbances are there from your end. Dr. Abhilasha.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, please share your screen.
Good afternoon, everyone. From St. G.S. Medical College, Anesthesia Department, I am Dr. Abhilasha Mudgare, presenting an audit of outcomes and need of blood products in patient with placenta accreta at a tertiary care center. In spite of so many advances in the field of medicine, obstetric hemorrhage is still the leading cause of maternal mortality. The main causes of as per WHO statistics, 25% of maternal mortality is due to postpartum hemorrhage. The main causes of postpartum hemorrhage are atonic uterus and abnormal placental location. In cases of abnormal placental location, preoperative internal iliac artery.
Abhilasha, presentation mode, please.
Hello?
Presentation mode. Slideshow.
Okay.
Put it in the slideshow mode.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I restart, ma'am?
No, please continue from introduction. You have a limited time.
Okay. The main causes of postpartum hemorrhage are atonic uterus and abnormal placental location. In cases of abnormal placental location, preoperative internal iliac artery balloon insertion and embolization has found to be useful in reducing blood loss, hence the need of blood transfusion, which further reduces maternal mortality and morbidity. We collected the data of 17 patients over a period of 1 year with placenta accreta who were posted for cesarean section and analyzed their outcomes. The collected data included age of the patient, location of the placenta knowing the USG or MRI findings, preoperative radiological intervention whether done or not, how much intraoperative blood loss and how many blood products were transfused, whether the patient had a hysterectomy done, whether the patient was shifted to ICU or any other complications. Internal iliac artery balloon insertion was done using local anesthesia in the intervention radiology suite. The anesthesiologist was needed there for monitored anesthesia care and transfer of the patient from IR suite to the operation theatre. Once in the theatre, general anesthesia was planned for all this classical cesarean section. Internal iliac artery balloon was inflated on table once the baby was delivered and cord was clamped. The amount of intraoperative blood loss and individual number of blood products transfused were noted. The timing of hysterectomy, if done, was also noted. The postoperative course in the ICU, whether shifted to the ICU and any other complications were also noted. The collected data was analyzed using simple arithmetic calculations. The result were as follows. Total number of analyzed patients 17. Average age of this patient is 29.5 years. Hysterectomy done for 23.5% on table during cesarean and 5% had a postoperative delayed hysterectomy. The average blood transfusion requirement was seen in 64.7% of patients. The individual blood product requirement was as follows. Mean, I'm telling the mean values. Packed red blood cells 2.1, fresh frozen plasma 1.1, platelets 1.2 and cryoprecipitate 0.17. Preoperative bilateral internal iliac balloon was inserted in 41.17% of patients. of which 11.7% needed a postoperative uterine artery embolization. Postoperative ICU care was required in 76.4% of patients. The average estimated blood loss was around 1867 ml in the range of 1200 to 4500 ml. The maternal outcome was good as we have not noted any maternal mortality. The neonatal outcome was also good except for one non-viable baby which was delivered at 22 weeks of gestation due to antepartum hemorrhage. Hence, we can suggest that when the patients with abnormal placental location are managed at a specialized centers with multidisciplinary approach involving obstetrician, pediatrician, intervention radiologist, blood bank backup, and anesthesiologist can have better outcomes. Since we are talking about the multidisciplinary approach, let's have a focus on the role of anesthesiologist. An anesthesiologist here is involved in detailed preoperative evaluation and anticipation of complications. Due to the absence of hybrid OT, anesthesia services are required for monitoring during transfer of parturients to and from the IR suite to operation theatre. Further, anesthesia management during the procedure, which involves intraoperative fluid management, transfusion of blood products with damage control resuscitation, monitoring fetal well-being, and maintaining uteroplacental circulation. Last but not the least, he is involved in a post-operative critical care as well. Let's come to the discussion part. A clinical audit is a quality improvement process which involves critical and systemic analysis of quality of patient care. It plays a dual role. It monitors changes in support of clinically effective practice and also serves as an educational tool for improvement. Here we have collected the data of 17 obstetric patients with abnormal placental location and have recorded their interventions done, the clinical outcome, and the post-operative course. The roles of intervention radiology is very crucial, but intervention radiology is not available at all places and at all times. In such situation, other modalities like uterine packing, intrauterine balloon tamponade, uterine compression sutures, pelvic vessel ligation can be done, but still the chances of uterine conservation are very minimal. Poor outcomes following maternal obstetric hemorrhage has been attributed to delayed treatment, unavailability of blood products, inaccurate estimation of blood loss, and absence of treatment protocols. Also, poor communication among the operating team and inadequate organizational support. Hence, from this audit, we learned that anticipation of complications, intervention radiological...
1 minute left.
For all the possible patients electively, access to massive transfusion package, ICU backup can help us in better outcome. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor. Over to the judges.
Yes.
Dr. Sujata.
Yes, Abhilash.
Dr. Abhilasha, you see, interventional radiology is not available in a large number of hospitals.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? So don't you think, and in the hospitals that you researched on, there was about 41% that underwent interventional radiology.
Yes, ma'am.
So do you think that your audit, right, may not be applicable to India as a whole?
Yes, ma'am. There are the limitations of studies. Since it was done in a tertiary care center and a specialized center where we have the facility of intervention radiology. But we do get patients which are shifted here from periphery and they have coming just like that.
No time to go for an interventional radiology.
Yes, ma'am. And also affordability is an issue. It's a costly procedure and many patients do not afford.
Okay, thank you so much.
Abhilasha,
Yes,
your study is good because in the case with plaster accreta, the planning is the most important one that is required because with the intervention studies and the balloon embolization is an easy procedure if you're planning very well.
Yes, ma'am.
In advanced centers,
yes, ma'am,
is that what you have meant, like the tertiary centers, we can do it easily because if you have got proper planning and if the patients are admitted earlier and on, you can very well manage it, isn't it? Okay, so your study is significant and it's also so important also. So we can reduce the mortality in patients with as well as the blood transfusion, the placenta accreta.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's good.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why we concluded like when all possible patients it should be done where the patients can afford and where the treatment facility is available.
So we have to stratify the patients and we have to make a plan for that.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Abhilasha, have you come across the practice of aortic cross-clamping in patients with plasma?
Sir, in these patients, no.
Oh, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Have you come across using aortic cross-clamping in classical patients to reduce the bleeding where the facilities of interventional radiology may not be available, and it's a very simple procedure?
No, sir.
That is very.
No, sir.
It's also found to be very effective procedure.
Okay. Yes.
You not come across. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Abhilasha, and thank you all the judges.
Thank you, ma'am.
Judges, please note. Next, we have with us Dr. Ashish Mathur, serial
Yes,
number
sir.
6.
Yes.
Dr. Ashish, kindly share your screen.
Good afternoon, respected judges.
Yes, go
May
to
I
the
start?
presentation mode.
Okay.
Slideshow mode. Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Ashish, your time starts now.
Okay. My study is a comparison of the intraperitoneal and periperitoneal 0.5% levobupivacaine and 0.5% ropivacaine for post-operative pain relief in laparoscopic cholecystectomy. We start with the introduction. As we all know, the pain is defined as the unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with the actual or potential tissue damage, or in the term of we start again. The pain is defined as the unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage, or in terms of such damage. Visceral pain following laparoscopic surgery is perceived due to the stretching of the intraperitoneal cavity, peritoneal inflammation and irritation of the phrenic nerve, whereas pain is an open procedure, is mainly somatic in nature. Levobupivacaine is an aminoamide type of local anesthetic. The reduced toxicity for levobupivacaine produces a wide safety margin in the daily clinical practice, either as single shot or in a continuous infusion, as well as for post-operative pain control. And the other drug is ropivacaine, a new long-acting amide local anesthetic agent, is a pure S enantiomers. It has shown to have higher CNS and cardiovascular safety compared with bupivacaine. Ropivacaine is virtually identical to bupivacaine in terms of onset, quality, duration, and sensory block, but seems to produce less motor block. And the material method is that we take 60 patients from ASA grade 1 and 2 undergoing elective cholecystectomy. Patient was classified randomly into two groups. One group is group R and one group is group L. Then group R, we take 30 patients and we give 30 ml of the 0.5% ropivacaine hydrochloride, and the other group is take 30 patients and give 0.5% levobupivacaine hydrochloride. And randomization was done with the closed envelope technique. And a 20 ml of test solution was installed by the operating surgeon on the upper surface of the liver and on the right subdiaphragmatic space under the vision of the camera through the epigastric port with the help of 18 gauge spinal leader. Patient was kept in tail-ended position for 5 minutes. At the end of procedure, intra-abdominal CO2 was carefully vented out by the surgeon and 10 ml of the test solution was injected as a skin infiltration into the all site of incision post-operatively. Patient was assessed for the parietal pain and visceral pain using a 100 mm visual analog score scale at 30 minutes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 12, and 24 hours. And rescue analgesic consists of an injection of tramadol 100 milligram intravenously, slowly, if VAS score more than 50. And now start with the result analysis. And as you can all consider, there is no statistical significant difference between the age in group 1 and group L and group R in weight. Group L and R and sex is almost equal in both the groups. And the duration of surgery is in group L is around 89.84 minutes and for group R is 90.5 minutes. And time for the first rescue analgesia is for group L is 225 minutes and for group R is 195 minutes. The time for first rescue analgesia is greater in group L as compared to the group R, as p-value is less than 0.05. And in table 3, we can see the statistical comparison of the VAS score in two groups at different post-operative time interval. And we can find that there is statistical significant difference found in VAS score between the two groups and second, third, fourth, and sixth hour. And the VAS score is for group L is 28.04, and for group R is 32.79. And the total dose of tramadol used in 24 hours in group L is 330 milligrams, and for group R is 383 milligrams. The consumption of the tramadol was significantly less in group L when compared to the group R. And this is the table 5 showing the complication. As we can understand, see that there is no severe complication in each group. And some patient is having nausea and vomiting, and some other patient having some shivering, and other patients don't have any complications. And this discussion, in discussion, we find that the hypothesis of this study to provide adequate postoperative pain relief of patient or pain after laparoscopic is an essential goal. And we see in the table 1, 2, and 3 in the demographic data is that we find there is no demographic statistical significant difference found in each group. And for duration of surgery for group L is 89.5 and group R is 90.5%. It is also statistically non-significant. Time for first rescue analgesia. In our study, the mean time for the first rescue analgesia in group L was 225 minutes, and for group R was 195 minutes respectively. On comparison of the application of the statistical analysis, there are significant prolongation of the time for first rescue analgesia for the group L as compared to group R. The above finding were the accordance with these writers. And then VAS score, we find that the VAS score is significant only for the second, third, 4th, 6th, and 24 hours. And we find a statistical comparison average VAS score for 24-hour observation period significantly higher VAS score were observed in group R when compared to the group L. And the total analgesic consumption is 24 hours. And a statistical comparison of total analgesic consumption is 24 hours for two groups. Patient in group L was found to be required significant lower dose of tramadol when compared to the group R. And the complication, we don't find any complication with each of the group. And as last conclusion, there was significant prolongation of the duration of the postoperative pain analgesia in levobuprofen group as compared to group ropivacaine group. In terms of analgesic efficacy, levobuprofen appeared to be the superior to ropivacaine. No significant adverse effect and hemodynamic instability is seen in both groups, levobuprofen and ropivacaine. Intraperitoneal installation combined with periportal infiltration of the local anesthetic is a useful adjuvant as a part of multimodal analgesic regimen to reduce the postoperative pain in laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ashish. Over to the judges. Dr. Mubarak, sir.
Dr. Ashish, what do you think, whether it is a visceral pain or a somatic pain, which is more significant in laparoscopic cholecystectomy?
There is a visceral pain is more important, more significant as compared to somatic.
So with your study, what is your advice to the community about the specialty?
Sir, as we can use levobuprofen as a installation and over the liver surface, it will be better result.
Okay.
Dr. Sujata or Dr. Shamshad? Yes, Shamshad ma'am.
Yes, Dr. Ashish, you have combined both intraperitoneal installation as well as periportal.
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So both of them have produced the same effect. That is when we compare the levobuprofen and ropivacaine.
Yes, ma'am. We find that ma'am, actually we compare the VAS score for the condition of the patient's pain. And we find that if it is more than 50 VAS score, we will give the rescue analgesia tramadol, and it will cover both the visceral and the periportal is the both.
So you are not able to analyze whether it is periportal or visceral.
No, ma'am.
You haven't checked.
Sir. No, ma'am.
You haven't checked. Only the VAS score alone was identified.
Yes.
Was checked. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, Dr. Ashish, why do you think levobuprofen proved to be a better analgesic than ropivacaine, according to you?
Ma'am, the rescue analgesic requirement is less for levobuprofen, and total duration of the...
Yes, I understood that.
Yes,
but why? Why do you think this occurred? Have you gone through any other literature regarding this?
We can study many literature, and if you want, then I can show the references.
No. I know that. That is why you did the study. That is all right. But have you come across the reason as to why this is better?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ashish and the judges. Next, we have with us Dr. Nikhila. Dr. Nikhila, please share your screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Go to the presentation mode. And your time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone. The title of my paper is a randomized comparative study between Dexmed and fentanyl on attenuating stress response and airway response to tracheal extubation. Tracheal extubation and emergence is associated with the significant hemodynamic alterations and is poorly tolerated by the patients with comorbid conditions. We compared the efficacy of dexmedetomidine and fentanyl in mitigating hemodynamic stress response and assessed the extubation quality in both the study groups. Introduction. Tracheal extubation is the discontinuation of an artificial airway when indications of, for its placements like airway obstruction, protection of airway, suctioning, ventilative failure, and hypoxemia no longer exist. Tracheal extubation is almost always associated with hemodynamic changes due to reflex sympathetic discharge caused by epipharyngeal and laryngopharyngeal stimulation. This increase in sympathetoadrenal activity may result in hypertension, tachycardia, and arrhythmias. This study was conducted to know the efficacy of dexmedetomidine and fentanyl on attenuation of hemodynamic response and airway reflexes during extubation following surgery under general anesthesia. The main aim of my study is to compare dexmedetomidine and fentanyl on attenuation of hemodynamic response and airway reflexes during extubation following surgery under general anesthesia with the following objectives. And this study was conducted in Sri B.M. Patil Medical College, Karnataka. It is a randomized comparative study conducted for 1.5 period from December 2018 to August 2020. Study population consists of 60. It is divided into 2 groups of 30 patients each, divided by computer-generated randomized number table. Group D, it is a dexmedetomidine. In this 0.4 microgram per kg body weight of dexmedetomidine is given intravenously. It is diluted in 20 ml of normal saline and infused over 15 minutes prior to completion of surgery. And group F is fentanyl 0.5 microgram per kg is given intravenously diluted in 20 ml of normal saline infused over 15 minutes prior to completion of surgery using an infusion pump. I've included criteria age group of 18 to 60 years, ASA grade of 1 and 2, Mallampati grade of 1 and 2, and patients giving valid and informed consent. I've excluded the patients suffering from cardiac and pulmonary disease, patients with anticipated difficult airway, pathology of oropharyngeal tract, patients on beta blockers, and patients with conduction defects of the heart block, pregnant women, morbidly obese patients, and the patients with anticipated difficult airway. My sample size consists of 30 patients each group. And a procedure after taking the informed consent, the patient was kept nil by mouth for 6 hours before surgery. After shifting the patient to pre-op room in order to attain double blinding, the person who was not involved in recording prepared a fentanyl 0.5 microgram per kg diluted in 20 ml in normal saline and dexmedetomidine 0.4 microgram per kg diluted to 20 ml in normal saline, and the patients were randomly allocated into 2 equal groups of 30 each over a period. And the patients received a fentanyl 0.5 microgram per kg or dexmedetomidine 0.4 microgram per kg over 15 minutes prior to the extubation. After pre-oxygenation, the patients were pre-induced with the injection midazolam 0.025 milligram per kg and fentanyl 1 to 2 microgram per kg. They are induced with the injection propofol 2 milligram per kg and intubation was facilitated with the injection etracurium 0.8 milligram per kg IV. Patients were maintained on 60% nitrous oxide in the oxygen, and isoflurane percentage is adjusted to maintain the hemodynamics within the normal range. Etracurium initial bolus and intermittent thereafter is used for maintenance of muscle paralysis. Intraoperatively, patients were ventilated to maintain the partial pressure of EtCO2 between 30 to 35 mm of Hg. About 15 minutes prior to the extubation, inhalational agent was stopped and infusion was started over a period of 15 minutes by the anesthesia resident who was unaware of contents of the infusion. After onset of spontaneous breathing, intravenous neostigmine 0.05 milligram per kg and glycopyrrolate 0.01 milligram per kg is administered to antagonize the effect of muscle relaxants. And the patients were extubated when the extubation criteria was fulfilled. The following parameters were observed, that is heart rate, systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, and mean arterial pressure. The above parameters were observed before reversal at the time of extubation, 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and 15 minutes after extubation. The side effects like hypotension, it is defined as a decrease in the systolic blood pressure more than 20% from the baseline, or a mean arterial pressure of less than 60 mm of Hg was corrected with the intravenous fluids and if required with a small doses of mefentramin 3 milligram intravenously. Bradycardia was defined as a heart rate of less than 50 beats per minute, and it is corrected with the atropine 0.6 milligram intravenously. Extubation quality score is noted, and Ramsey sedation score is noted. Then this method of statistical analysis, it is done using chi-square test for the association between two categorical variables. The difference of the means of analysis variables between two independent groups were tested.
1 minute left.
This is a discussion. There is a increase in the heart rate in the fentanyl group compared to dexmedetomidine group, and there is an increase in the systolic blood pressure in the fentanyl group compared to dexmedetomidine group, and there diastolic blood pressure and side effects were noted in more in systolic in group F fentanyl group. In group F, 4 patients had vomiting and 2 had shivering. In group D, 2 patients developed bradycardia and 3 patients developed hypotension, but none developed shivering or hypotension. And in our study, this mean arterial pressure it showed an increase in there is more in a fentanyl group compared to dexmedetomidine group. And summary, the heart rate and heart rate was increased in both the patients during extubation, but the increase was more in group F patients. Group D attenuated the increase in the blood pressure to a greater degree than group F. The airway response was better attenuated in group D compared to group F. The patients in group D were
Dr. Nikhila, your time is over.
When compared to group F, the incidence of bradycardia and hypotension, though minimal, is present in group D, which was easily managed. Conclusion, from the data and statistical analysis, we conclude that fentanyl compared to fentanyl.
Over to the judges. Over to the judges, Mubarak sir.
Dr. Nikhila, do you think whether it is intubation or extubation which is most stressful to the patient? You are not audible. You are not audible. Please, you are not at all audible. Please unmute if it is mute.
Extubation is more stressful to the patients
when compared to intubation. That's what you're.
Yes.
Why? Why do you say so?
Because of the drugs. Because of the drugs which we have given during the procedure of anesthesia, and during extubation there are more chances of laryngospasm. And
so you think extubation is more stressful than the patient. So your conclusion is extubation is more stressful than intubation, is it?
Yes, sir.
Your slides were too crowded and was not should have reduced the content of your slides. So in your future presentation, please take care to reduce the contents of your slides, and it should not be too crowded. Okay. Okay, over to other judges.
Okay.
After giving the fentanyl and the dexmedetomidine, how long you have observed the patient in the postoperative period?
I have observed for a period of 20 minutes, ma'am, after extubation. For every 5, 10, 15 and 20 minutes, I have recorded heart rate, systolic blood pressure, mean arterial pressure, and extubation response I have observed until 20 minutes.
Was it sufficient? After giving fentanyl as well as 0.5 milligram per kg and dexmed of about 0.4 microgram per kg per minute, is it sufficient for 20 minutes? You are really worried about the complications as well as the laryngospasm and all, isn't it? So yes, ideally, after giving this, what is your conclusion? What was your conclusion?
Compared to fentanyl, dexmedetomidine showed a smooth extubation, ma'am, compared to fentanyl.
Yes, more hemodynamical stability was there.
Yes, And
With the interest
less
of
learning.
time,
What's-
can we move to the next session, please? With the
Okay.
interest of time, can we move to the
Sure,
next
sure.
session,
Sure,
please?
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you, Nikhila. Thank you, judges. Next, we have with us Dr. Vibha.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Vibha, go
Audible.
to the presentation mode.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes,
Yes,
you're
you are.
audible.
Okay, fine.
And your time starts now.
Good afternoon. My topic for presentation is comparative study of buprenorphine, dexmedetomidine, and clonidine as an adjuvant in subarachnoid block for lower limb orthopedic surgeries. As we all know, spinal anesthesia is safe and reliable method of anesthesia. In order to improve the quality of blockade and prolong the duration of analgesia, many adjuvants have been added to spinal drug time to time, like opioids, alpha-2 adrenergic agonist, ketamine, midazolam. So this study was designed to compare onset and duration of sensory and motor block, hemodynamic effect, postoperative analgesia, and adverse effect of dexmedetomidine, clonidine, and buprenorphine given intrathecally with 0.5% hyperbaric bupivacaine for lower limb orthopedic surgeries. So starting with buprenorphine, it is a long-acting, highly lipophilic opioid which is 25 times more potent than morphine. Clonidine, which is a partial alpha-2 receptor agonist and acts over dorsal horn of the spinal cord. Dexmedetomidine, another alpha-2 receptor agonist, but highly alpha-2 selective agonist. So my reference study was done in 2030 by Vidhi Mahendru and group, comparing the doses of dexmedetomidine, clonidine, and fentanyl as an adjuvant in lower limb surgeries. So after getting approval from scientific and ethical committee of our institute, that is Jagjivan Ram Railway Hospital, Mumbai, adult patients of age 20 to 65 years and falling under ASA 1 and 2 category were selected for this study. It was a prospective randomized single-blind comparative study with a 1 year of duration. This was the combined spinal epidural kit which was used in my study, and epidural was used for rescue analgesia. These were the drugs used for this study. And by using the sample size formula, 90 patients were selected undergoing lower limb orthopedic surgeries, and they were divided into 3 groups of 30 each. Each patient received drug volume of 3.5 ml, and every patient was having common of 15 mg of 0.5% hyperbaric bupivacaine, with group B receiving 90 mics of buprenorphine, group C receiving 30 mics of clonidine, and group D receiving 5 mics of dexmedetomidine. After induction, onset and duration of sensory block, motor block onset was recorded. Postoperatively, motor block recovery, sensory block regression were noted, and pain score was assessed with visual analog scale. The statistical analysis was done with quantitative data by using mean and standard deviation, categorical and nominal data expressed in percentage. P-value was set with less than 0.05, and analysis was carried out using SPSS software 21. In results, it was observed that 75% of cases in my study were of total knee replacement. Rest cases were of tibial plating, nailing, higher tibial osteotomy, and total hip replacement. As comparing to demographic data and baseline vitals and duration of surgery, all the 3 groups were comparable. Similarly, for mean motor block score, level of sensory block for 5, 10, and 15 minutes, all groups were comparable. The most significant data which was observed was duration of sensory block, duration of analgesia, and duration of motor block, which was maximum for dexmedetomidine group, followed by clonidine, and minimum for buprenorphine group. Best pain control was observed in cases of dexmedetomidine group during first hour of procedure, followed by clonidine group. Highest visual analog score was reported in case of buprenorphine group during first postoperative hour. Regarding complications, it was found to be lowest in dexmedetomidine group. Significant hypotension was observed in 43.3% of cases of clonidine group, and 2 cases reported bradycardia. Sedation, which was assessed with de Kock sedation scale, was main complication observed in buprenorphine group. Regarding discussion, we observed that the best pain control was observed in dexmedetomidine group compared to other 2 groups, and it was comparable with our reference study, that is Mahendru et al., which compared the duration of analgesia of dexmedetomidine with clonidine and fentanyl. Regarding complication, it was observed that lowest complication was seen in dexmedetomidine group, significant hypotension was seen in clonidine, and sedation was observed in buprenorphine group. So a study done by Rashmi et al., which compared the different doses of buprenorphine intrathecally, observed that the all side effect evaluated was the sedation was the most common in the study groups. A study done by Krishna Kumar et al., comparing adjuvants, buprenorphine, clonidine, and fentanyl with hyperbaric bupivacaine in lower abdominal surgeries, observed that the maximum drop in pulse pressure, pulse rate, and mean arterial pressure was observed in clonidine group, which was similar findings with our study. In conclusion, we observed that the good analgesia is achieved by clonidine, but its use is limited by incidence of hypotension and bradycardia. The use of intrathecal dexmedetomidine as an adjuvant to bupivacaine seems to be an attractive alternative to clonidine and buprenorphine for long duration of surgery procedures.
1 minute left.
However, prolonged duration of motor blockade with the dexmedetomidine may be undesirable for short-term surgical procedures or ambulatory surgeries. So these are the references. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vibha. Over to the judges. Dr. Sujata.
Dr. Vibha, how were your patients randomized? Can you describe
it was
the
randomized
procedure?
with computerized randomization.
Yes, and then?
They were divided in separate groups, and it was basically a chart which was formed by my statistician. So a proper chart was made in which first 30 groups were divided into different areas. Accordingly, that proper chart was made, and I followed that same numbers for the all the drugs.
Okay, yes. Actually, it's a table and there's a way. Please look it up once again, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Computer generated random number table comes out.
Yes, ma'am. It was made in randomizer.org.
Yes.
It was organized.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Shamshad, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. And that is good. And you found that the sedation score was more with the clonidine, isn't it?
Ma'am, buprenorphine.
Is it? Buprenorphine.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, otherwise it's okay. It's a good study. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Vibha, and thank you, judges.
Thank you.
We'll move to the next and the last session. It's by Dr. Manisha Sharma. Dr. Manisha Sharma, please go to the slideshow presentation mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to present my topic on.
Your time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Manisha. Today I'm going to give my presentation on comparison of quadratus lumborum block versus thoracic paravertebral block for post-operative analgesia in patients of laparoscopic nephrectomy, a prospective randomized control trial. Introduction: quadratus lumborum block was first described in 2007. There are 4 different approaches to perform it based on the site of the injection. QLB type 1 was proposed by Blanco in 2007, where the needle is inserted into the plane between the psoas major and quadratus lumborum, called the lateral quadratus lumborum block. QLB type 2, injection site is posterolateral to quadratus lumborum muscle, also called posterior quadratus lumborum. QLB type 3 is transmuscular quadratus lumborum block described by Borglum et al., where needle is advanced through the latissimus dorsi and the quadratus lumborum muscle is postero-anterior direction with injection anterior to the quadratus lumborum muscle, also called anterior quadratus lumborum. Lastly, there is QLB type 4, which is intramuscular QLB, where anesthetic is injected directly into quadratus lumborum muscles. Quadratus lumborum block provides abdominal wall and visceral analgesia, and one of its mechanism is the dispersion of the local anesthetic into the paravertebral space. Elshkirvi et al. Investigated the posterior quadratus lumborum approach at a L3, L4 level and found staining up to T10 inside the lateral thoracic paravertebral space. We described performance of QLB type 2, that is posterior QLB, for postoperative analgesia and laparoscopic nephrectomy. QLB is an abdominal truncal block which produces analgesic effect through local anesthetic that covers thoracolumbar fascia and thoracic paravertebral space. So we intend to compare it with thoracic paravertebral block for postoperative analgesia. Aim and objective: primary outcome is to assess the difference in the mean visual analog scale, VAS pain score, in the first 24 hours after the surgery. Secondary outcome is to compare ease of performance of either block, complication of the block, cumulative morphine consumption, patient recovery, and patient satisfaction in either group. Material and method: study was designed as prospective randomized controlled trial. It was conducted over a period of 3 months. Total of 90 patients, 45 in each group were taken. Written informed consent was obtained from all the participants before they were included in the study. Inclusion criteria are age 18 to 65 years, undergoing laparoscopic nephrectomy, American Society of Anesthesiology 1 and 2, patient posted under general anesthesia. Exclusion criteria: known allergy to anesthetic being used, infection site or subcutaneous hematoma close to the puncture site, severely altered hemostasis, history of previous surgical intervention, history of bleeding diathesis, and patient and anticoagulation. Randomization was performed using random number list that was computer generated. Patients were randomly assigned to quadratus lumborum group, that is Q, and paravertebral block group P. General anesthesia was given in both the groups and block was performed at the end of surgery before extubation. With patient in lateral position, an ultrasound machine sonocyte with 5 to 13 megahertz linear eddy probe was used. In group Q, drug was deposited at L3, L4 level between the transversalis fascia and quadratus lumborum. In both the groups, patient received block with 0.25% bupivacaine, 0.5 ml per kg. Quadratus lumborum block was given at L3, L4, and thoracic paravertebral was performed at T10 level. Visual analog score was pain was recorded at 1, 4, 8, 12, 24 hours. Rescue analgesia in form of morphine in boluses of 1.5 to 2 mg if required was given post-operatively in first 24 hours after the surgery. Coming to the result, in table 1, we see patient demographic data. So demographic data is comparable in both the group, that is Q and P group. And age, height, weight, ASA classification, surgery time, both are comparable. In table 2, post-operative pain score, VAS score at 1, 4, 8, 12 and 24 post-operative hours. We see that VAS scoring is also comparable in both the groups until 24 hours we see. And there is no significant difference found between the two groups. Table 3, post-operative rescue analgesia consumption, that is total morphine requirement in first 24 hours in mg. This is also comparable in both the group. Also the time to first analgesia in minutes that are comparable and p value is comparable and non-significant. Discussion: the anatomical work performed by Borglum et al. Reveals that quadratus lumborum block the injected spread cephalad to the thoracic paravertebral space. If the efficiency
1 minute left.
QLB is equal to that of thoracic paravertebral, QLB could replace thoracic paravertebral block in abdominal surgery because of its relative safe, convenient to perform, while TPVB has possibility of pneumothorax, dural puncture, hematoma in thoracic paravertebral space. In our study, we found that QLB is equally comparable to postoperative analgesia to TPVB, and also requirement of rescue analgesia is non-significant. There is ease of performance of ultrasounded guided QLB with less complications. Thus, we conclude that QLB is equally effective to TPVB block in providing postoperative analgesia and laparoscopic nephrectomies without any significant adverse effect. So it can be recommended as alternative nerve block for postoperative analgesia and laparoscopic nephrectomy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Manisha. Over to the judges. Shamshad ma'am.
Yes, Manisha, why you selected the quadratus lumborum block as type 2? Why you selected, you have described it as 3, type 1, QLB 1, type 1, type 2, and type 3. Why you selected type 2 as more?
Ma'am, type 2 we selected for laparoscopic nephrectomies where drug is given posterior to the quadratus lumborum block, ma'am, and it spreads to the thoracic paravertebral space, ma'am. So it is easier to perform, ma'am, and also like, ma'am, with ultrasound we can identify the structure, and we have selected this only, ma'am, to see the paravertebral space spread, ma'am. Giving that drug posterior to quadratus lumborum muscle, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. The other judges can continue with this.
Dr. Manisha, I think Shamshad ma'am was basically asking you, why did you choose type 2 and not 1 or 3? I believe, ma'am, you were asking that.
Yes,
isn't it?
Yes.
definitely.
Yes. Why
she's-
2 specifically? Is there any advantage in type 2?
Ma'am, it is
Very
between
easy.
quadratus lumborum and Soyer's measure, and spread is to the thoracic paravertebral space, ma'am. That space continues in the thoracic paravertebral space. So, ma'am, this would be the reason what I feel, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Manisha.
Thank you, ma'am.
So we have come to the end of this delegate paper presentation session.
Ma'am, Dr. Divya is still not there, I believe.
Yeah, ma'am. We tried to reach her. Her phone is switched off.
Okay. Then it's fine.
Are you in the board or what somewhere? Joined with the other names? So we had 9 papers, but 8 presenters have presented.
Yes.
Yes. So on behalf of the ISA WebCon Kerala 2020, I thank all our judges and all the speakers who has presented. Thank you, Shamshad ma'am. Thank you, Datta ma'am.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the organizers too, and for inviting us. Thank you so much.
Okay, same. Thank you. And the ISF webinar is going on very nicely, and it is so interesting. And congratulations to the ISF Malanad.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
And requesting you to please send the scorecard to Dr. Sam Philip.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.